Dean Schwartz will be moderating this incredible session with Miriam Rivera and Wendy Kopp with a global lens. So we have focused the morning a lot about the US. This session is really meant to be thinking about AI in a global context, okay? But let me say a few words about Dan Schwartz and embarrass him a little bit. So Dan Schwartz is our longest-standing dean at the Graduate School of Education. He actually just announced that he was stepping down from the deanship at the end of June, which is a big deal because of all the things that he has accomplished for the school and for Stanford University, including this big new building that we are in, which is one of the big accomplishments of Dean Schwartz. The other big accomplishments is obviously the Stanford Accelerator for Learning, which didn't exist before Dean Schwartz invented and created this new initiative to connect research and practice. But also, Dean Schwartz is maybe my favorite piece in his bio is that he was a teacher. And he was a teacher in multiple interesting locations. He started his career in southern Los Angeles, in a tough neighborhood there, and then moved to Alaska, where he taught in a very small community, one of our rural communities in the US. And then he also taught in Kenya, which might be actually the most relevant for this session on global education here. So with no further ado, let me welcome Dean Schwartz, Wendy Kopp, and Miriam Rivera. Thank you.
I'll see if I can. So, yes, so it came out in the Stanford report that I'm stepping down. I'm still running the accelerator, but the report came out. It was very nice. It was my obituary. It was really weird. And so people are saying things, where I have to write back. I said, I'm not dying. I'm still here. But, so I'm really fortunate. I have two huge change makers. And what I love about them both is they're helping other people to help other people. And so this is really spectacular. So each of you has kind of a different approach. And so I'm going to first ask kind of what's the AI scene out there? And then I'll probably follow up with, is there something at stake? And you can do both at the same time or not. But Wendy, I think you go first and let everybody know what you're doing.
Gosh, what's the AI scene and what's at stake?
Yeah, globally. Because I don't leave the sunny Palo Alto.
I don't. Okay, so first of all, I guess you all know, but just to be, I started Teach for America a long time ago, 37 years ago. Thank you. But about 18 years ago, I started on this incredible journey to work alongside many others to build out the Teach for All network of organizations similar to Teach for America in now 63 countries and growing. Inspired by just meeting people around the world from different countries who were determined that something similar needed to happen in their country. So it's a network of all these independent, locally led organizations that are all working to leverage this kind of approach that we share to develop what we've come to call collective leadership to ensure all kids fulfill their potential. So at the core of our work is the idea that people change systems. And ultimately, when you have enough people in a place working around the whole ecosystem around kids who share the same purpose to make sure the system enables all kids to thrive and are exercising agency towards that end and are working together to learn together and collaborate, then you start seeing systems improve. So, so we're very people focused. Right. I think, what is the AI scene? I don't know. That's such a lofty question. I'm not sure I'm prepared to answer that. But what I will say is having, and I'm very curious what you'll say, because I mean, you probably have been even closer to this world, certainly, than I have. But I guess from watching the kind of ed tech space over the last 2 decades or so, I mean, we felt that we sort of missed, in a way, ensuring that the people driving ed tech were teachers who are super committed to equity and have strong pedagogy. Like where we saw teachers, equity-focused folks committed to the transformation of education, driving the change with technology, we saw really good things for kids. But by and large, I don't know that that's what we have seen. And so with the advent of AI, what we're thinking about is how do we make sure that it's our teachers and our educators, especially those working in the most marginalized communities, who are at the forefront of driving how we utilize this. So that's one thing that's very much on our minds.
Is there any discussion about the AI replacing teachers or filling in where it's hard to get teachers? Are you hearing this globally?
I mean, there are all sorts of people, of course, who throw that out. I mean, technology and AI amplifies what's there. I mean, that's the lesson of the last however, and I could give you some stunning examples of that. So where you have a school that's not on a mission and you enter technology into that school, it becomes this incredible amplifier of a lot of not good stuff. And it becomes a huge source of distraction. Where you have a mission-centered school with incredible school leadership and teachers and everyone's really working to equip our young people to shape a better future for themselves and all of us, to develop them holistically, everyone's on a mission. You enter AI or technology into that and it's like, man, it's incredible, right? Like every teacher has an assistant, you're using it. I mean, I've seen such incredible applications of AI already. I was in a school in Singapore like 2 weeks ago, and the teachers had surveyed the kids asking them who their friends were. I mean, this is just a minor thing, but it just shows you like, are you kidding? Like they used it to develop their seating charts. So they took the connector kids and the kids who actually didn't have any friends, and I don't know exactly what they told the AI to do, but they were so happy about this. And they had done so many other things with AI. So you can do so many good things when the tool is in the hands of good people. So my obsession is, I think it's become, I mean, if we don't reset entirely as a society and decide to prioritize education completely differently and invest what we need to invest to inspire and develop our strongest talent as a country and as a world to create incredibly powerful educational environments, I think we risk a tremendous amount because this tool could become a huge distraction. And also, all these kids in our classrooms today, they got the power now because they've got AI. So we better be really, really, really determined to make sure that all of our kids get the kind of education that will enable them to make the world better and to improve our collective welfare rather than the opposite.
Miriam, your turn. So question one, what are you seeing out there? You provide funding for ed tech, and then is there anything in the balance?
I think there's a lot in the balance, and I have a lot of optimism and a lot of fear of where AI can take us as a society. Silicon Valley has had a long history of really anti-social kinds of movements, including in the earliest days of the semiconductor, a real belief that there are just different classes of humans and some of them are better than others. I can see that happening with some of the technology champions in AI. There's this big conversation about when will the first billion-dollar company be created by one person. And that seems to be the goal, I think, of how many people are thinking about it. And even a real sense that removing some of the labor costs is going to make these technologies so much more valuable than any other technology that has ever existed before. And I certainly think that that is actually really possible. So we're looking at really a restructuring of work, a restructuring of society as people have an ability to use these tools and to be creators and to create value with technology. So on the social order, I think it's a very huge, huge shift. I come from like really a very humble family. My parents came as migrant farm workers from Puerto Rico. They used to do the crops between Florida and New York. One of the things that kind of made a difference in my life was that I was admitted to a private school where I had computer science for 3 years of my high school education between the late 70s and the early 80s. So, you know, when they talk about outliers, that's the kind of thing that can happen in your life, that some random event happens that you then are on a wave that you would never have been able to access without it. And because of that, I also happen to have an internship in a computer program when the personal computer first came out. And I worked on the first generation search IPOs as an attorney when there were 39 million users on the World Wide Web. So hardly anybody was on it. And I think that for me, this is a wave where I see a lot of optimism also possible, because what this has done is actually reduced the cost of coding to practically zero. So that means that people who can create using technology can help solve problems that they know about in a much more cost-effective way than has ever been possible at all. Really, that is the opportunity, I think, in education. And I hope that, like, when I think about Teach for America, I hope it will be a group of young people. I'm assuming most of them are in their 20s, and like my daughter, they're doing everything with AI around homework. They're having books read to them while they're driving to Santa Cruz to go surfing, so that they don't have to spend all that time in reading a book. And they're really starting their drafts of everything, interrogating an AI around the subject. And so they're really just learning in a very different way from how I think I did, as I spent 6 hours a night at the library when I was at Stanford, trying to read all my law cases and business school cases, et cetera. But I think that this is really the opportunity is for those who are trained to use AIs to create, not for people who are taught to consume technology. Because I think that's really one of the things that is the difference between what I see happening a lot of the times in, like in a private school education versus a public school education. Like, people get access to computers, but they're just doing different things. And, I have a daughter who's like using it to create three-dimensional wood products, or she's doing 3D printing with it. She's not a technical undergraduate, but she had computer science. She does actually learn how to produce things with it, as opposed to just be on TikTok watching videos. So I think there's a big difference in opportunity. I'd love to see the Teach for America kids like helping schools to really transform how their students are learning, how teachers are using AI, so that they can actually get the most out of education and be creating with it.
Well, I love that. I'm a big fan of using AI to surpass yourself, as opposed to being told what to do by the AI. So you're gonna have to be patient, because it's gonna take me a long while to get into the actual question here. It's just something I've observed in the last today, but also yesterday, and some other things. And I think it touches, both of you have proposed that the teachers need to be involved, and in your case, the students need to be involved. They need to be wielding the AI. So I want to make a slight contrast. So a lot of people talk about AI as doing personalization. And so generally the model that they have in mind is there is a sort of this curriculum, and personalization means you move forward or backward based on where the student's at, and then maybe you change the content from rainbows to volcanoes, depending on what the kid's interested in. So that's one model, and it's a good model. It's useful for many things, but something that I'm seeing, and I've heard here, and I've seen in the projects and at Stanford students, is it's more targeting demographics they've come from. So, for example, one proposal is to create something that translates into ASL, sign language, because they have experience. Or issues of different kinds of disabilities, like ADHD, or being on the spectrum, or second language learners. And so here are all these students making tools for these smaller demographics that the market's probably not going to serve because there's not enough return. So I find this quite interesting, that this is what's happening, everybody who's using it to create the needs for themselves. Okay, so now I'm going to give you a question that probably just ignore and talk about what you want. But so I don't actually have the cat food, but I'm in the position where I get to distribute the cat food. And this is a joke. How do you get faculty to do anything together? You move the dish of cat food and they all go there. So how should here's a great university. What should I do to get them to help more people trying to create in this space? Is it already happening? Do I just need to help them do it better? Like, what could I do to help your teachers design the AI systems for their mission-driven schools? And so university, great talent, high energy, insight, oftentimes use research, not always.
I mean, what I would say, okay, so, well, our approach at the moment to try to do differently than what we did 20 years ago with technology and education is to just do everything we can to get teachers using this in their classrooms, despite all the challenges, because they are 60% of them in places with no connectivity. So it's like, how do we can't let that stop us. Like, if they're not going to use it during their time in these classrooms, then they won't become the leaders needed to drive the change. So we're doing everything we can to foster, help them know how to use it, foster their experimentation, foster their learning with each other. And then we're assuming that's going to generate lots of cool innovations like those you just mentioned, and we'll get behind them and try to support their leadership. But what I would say is that the first question, because I'm really thinking about your question, what can Stanford do? I mean, first of all, you can contribute to their learning, and but there's probably a lot we could do to engage faculty and students here with those communities of practice that, we have 1,000 teachers in these communities at the moment, et cetera. But I always think about the fact that, the question I get now in every room is, how will AI change teaching and learning? And it's an important question, but it's not the first question. The first question, and a question that for some reason still we are not asking everywhere, in every school, in every community, in every country, at the global level, is what are we working towards for kids? In today's world. Because we have educators showing up at schools that were built 150, 200 years ago, however many in different countries. And it's the one thing that hasn't changed at all, right? We haven't rethought the very purpose of education for today. We need everyone everywhere considering the question of, given the values and histories in any given place, and given the challenges facing kids in that place and the opportunities they have in that place, and given our global aspirations, what are we trying to accomplish? What are the contextualized, if we can embrace that, we need to move from a paradigm that we've had, which is around individual attainment of academic results. Of course, there are the islands of incredible schools like some of you probably have your kids in, but the vast majority of kids show up at schools that were created in that paradigm. And we need to evolve to a different paradigm, right? Holistic student development for our collective welfare. Unless we start there and then say, okay, now how can we use all the tools at our disposal to get where we're trying to go for kids? we'll just be tinkering around the edges again, and it won't transform anything really. So Stanford can help propagate the right question, which you're probably doing already at some stage, but it hasn't taken over the world. Like, we're not rethinking the purpose of education to the extent that we need to.
Oh, I think I have the right question. Nobody will listen. But no, I'm not going to tell you what it is. No, I've actually noticed a change. So, schools will have, these are our values, or this is what we want our students to be when they graduate. And a funny change is they now all include things like great empathizer, collaborator, resilient. I don't see math, English proficiency on those anymore. So there has been a movement towards these more durable skills. It may just be a Bay Area thing. I don't get out much.
No, I think there's been a big movement. I mean, if I look at now versus 10 years ago, like, what are we talking about at the global level? Like, there's been a movement, but we are far from communities everywhere stepping up from today's conception of school with the diverse stakeholders who need to do that. It has to include families, like parents and policymakers and the employers and the educators all together asking themselves, in this community, what are we going to work towards for kids, or else things will not fundamentally change. Because you'll still have parents thinking, and then we need to go to the next step, which is help all of us adults in the system unlearn how we were taught and learn a different way of viewing what education should be and how we view students and how we view teachers. And this is a big, huge shift.
Yeah, no,
Without that, once we do that, AI is going to answer itself. If we just embrace AI without doing that, we're going to still be here looking at the same schools with probably more inequity and more.
You had the right question. So I do wish this had happened before I chose to go into teaching. And my parents' response was, really? That's what we paid for a college education, is you become a teacher?
That's still everyone's
I know,
parents' response.
Miriam, what can a university do to help? We're smart people, hardworking. Stanford's particularly game to be innovative.
Well, let me go to one of the points that you're making about, like, what is education like for the students and what kind of education makes a difference. I was a Head Start kid. Head Start made a big difference in my life. I didn't even speak English when I went to Head Start, right? And part of it is that engagement with learning started in that room. And I also had a diverse teacher, and maybe one of the fewer diverse teachers I would ever have actually in my whole entire education in Head Start. The other thing that I think was so important was I had just generally good teachers throughout my public school education in Chicago public schools. But I came to a new middle school that actually had a gifted program at that time in a very low-income community. And, I had this one amazing teacher, Miss Weinstein. She literally bought, like, secondhand books like Grapes of Wrath, Upton Sinclair's Jungle, Oliver Twist. And she bought all used copies, and we got our books, right, from her. And we used those books to both learn how to write, to understand the vocabulary, to learn how to spell, and then to learn how to engage in discussion and self-reflection. So it was about as cheap of an education as you really could imagine, right? Like, the cost of 30 copies of these paperback Penguin books was probably like $1 each. And, the teacher getting us to actually talk and think was very inexpensive. But it was profoundly important in terms of my personal growth as a human being. That was the first time I ever heard the human condition, is in 6th grade, and had to really understand, like, the condition of poverty was part of what she was having us read about and talk about when we're talking about, like, Oliver Twist and Fagin and what response to poverty Oliver Twist would have, and would he want more and should he get more. That was just such a powerful thing. And my 7th grade curriculum was focused around plays, actually. And we did a variety of classic American plays, Shakespeare, just a lot of different things. And we happened to have a joint teacher program where there was a male instructor who was also a method actor in the evenings, but a Chicago public school teacher during the day, and then an English teacher as well. And that was another thing that I saw boys have a completely different frame around education and masculinity than they would have been exposed to but for that class. Again, like primary sources, great teachers, and a room. That's really what we had. And I think that really fundamentally that's what education really is. And that we don't want technologies to kind of get at the core function of education, which I would argue is not, it's about like being able to do self-reflection, being able to understand one's own emotion and self-manage, being able to express that emotion in constructive ways, like these boys were learning in this example of watching a very muscle-bound actor teach how to get in touch with your emotions so you could actually cry on a stage. Education, I think, is what's really happening between the people, and then the skills that you're acquiring in education, I think, are things for which technology can be very useful, right? Like it's good to have a pen and a piece of paper. It's good to use a computer. Those are tools that we use to actually work on the skills that we need to have, like the writing, the reading, the vocabulary, the spelling. And I think that we can get a lot of that without necessarily using a lot of the precious time that the people have in that room with those primary sources and teachers and students to help give them skills that they may not have at home. My parents were, like, my father had a high school education, my mother had a 6th grade education. This was not somebody who was going to help me with my homework, right? So I learned other things from my parents that I couldn't get in school, but I needed to get a lot of the skills I needed for life from my teachers and my school, my jobs, those kinds of things. And I feel like we never should get away from like what is actually happening in the classroom that is really education, because education isn't just about the intellect, it's also about the heart.
So I've got a, both of these answers were superb, thank you. You didn't help that much. They're hard. So I could do a seed grant that says, what are the most important questions about what children should become that goes beyond getting right and wrong answers? Something like that. And then I give them extra money if they have a solution or a way to measure it. No?
I don't know. I'm realizing, like, I'm here at Stanford, and you're asking what can Stanford do, so I can't resist saying one more thing.
Do it.
Although I know this is the ed school.
As long as it's not mean.
So you can't particularly maybe be the one to do this, but I think Stanford should, and so should other universities, like really step back and consider, given the disruption that's happening right now thanks to AI in entry-level jobs, how do we create a norm shift in first job choices? Can we stop funneling kids from the minute they step foot on this campus into a very narrow set of corporate jobs, and instead say, first, put yourself on the front lines of the reality in your country. Teach in an under-resourced school, work as an EMT, serve as a case manager working with unhoused folks, do any number of other things, because we're going to need your human skills. Like, those first jobs, what you do shapes who you become. And we're seeing fewer and fewer of the Stanford students and the other students around the country who go to these selective colleges I mean, more and more of them just put themselves in skyscrapers, and fewer are putting themselves in front of reality. And it's a real risk to our country. Like, I think it's one of our biggest issues. And we need to tackle it aggressively right now when we have this incredible window of opportunity.
So a fabulous point. Stanford's working on this. We're doing lots of stuff. Unfortunately, this is a session on AI.
I know.
Bring it
exactly.
back. No, you can do it. You can. I'm gonna go to Miriam.
Okay, back to AI.
No, work on it while I talk to Miriam for a second.
I do think, though, that the students, for example, are the ones that are the most facile with this technology of anybody. So it is really important for them to be in different spaces. And I would say that Stanford does, I think, a pretty good job of getting people to, on a volunteer basis, volunteer in communities. And I know throughout my entire life as an adult, like I've always served in some sort of volunteerism around education and in other communities. And so I consider that is one way that we do it. And I know at different times, we've actually very actively promoted public service careers and internships, because I worked in that program when I was just a recent graduate from Stanford, and I think we helped a lot of people actually access those kind of opportunities. So I think that we do a good job of trying to also fund students so they can do those kinds of things, even if they can't get paid by the not-for-profit, or the not-for-profit only has a limited amount of ability to pay them. So I think that is a continuing way in which we should serve our communities. I think that we actually need to put the more technically savvy students out there. That's a different constituency that I don't think we quite enroll in the same way in some of these programs, because they're being really, I think, very much funneled into entrepreneurship really early, but which I think is a great place for people, obviously. And I invest in a lot of people that have technology backgrounds that are starting education technology companies and other companies as well. But my sense is, I totally agree. Like, there is such a bifurcation in our country about how people know each other. I used to say that church was the most segregated hour in America. I just think that we've just gotten more hours segregated in America, and that people often are only interacting with people in their same class, race, level of education. Sometimes I had a party one time and I thought, my God, everybody here has a master's degree at least. That's just not the real world. And I am fortunate in that, because of my life history, that's not the only world that I inhabit, but I think for many of us and our students here, that is the world that they primarily inhabit, and they have very little exposure to the real world and to the real needs of a lot of Americans, the majority of whom are in financial situations that don't allow them to have a $400 emergency. If like their car breaks down, that can like really push them over the edge. If COVID happens, they become homeless. I mean, this is not this is my family, right? Like, I support 3 siblings in part because those kinds of things have happened to them, and they've grown up in environments where they've become subject to drug addiction or other kinds of issues that are really happening, because I think people do lose hope in our communities because they're so isolated from the opportunity that this country represents. And so I would encourage us to continue to encourage students to do volunteerism, to be of service in local communities, to look at internships and careers in these spaces, and to fund grants.
So I've got it. So what we do is we do internships for students, and it's like service learning. They need to spend a good amount of time in the community, and then they have to create AI apps for the community.
Yeah,
Did I get the AI?
They will.
Or help the
will.
community build apps around the needs of that community. Because I think the understanding, what I'm trying to get at with saying that the cost of coding is free, is that now the experience of people who actually are aware of a problem and have ideas for how to solve that problem are much more valuable. Yes. We're seeing this in the enterprise when we talk about like vibe coding for the enterprise, for example. When I was at Google, I created a ton of applications for my legal department. Some of them were very simple things, like this was before like DocuSign didn't exist yet. So we created a little thing that could sign things. We created another thing that could do non-disclosure agreements. There were thousands of them being made because we made it available so easily, and you didn't have to go through a lawyer, and you didn't have to take time of a lawyer. And we created things that were like approval processes for getting a contract signed that was used for like the next 15 years after I left. So I think that this knowledge that the community has, combined with the technical skills that others can bring to it, will solve a lot more problems.
So an added bonus of this is there's something called the Haas Center, and students go out and do service learning. And this is the gateway drug for the undergraduates to come to the School of Education. They get to see the experience of service, and they know education is a service-oriented thing. So I got one last bucket of questions, and this is about partnerships. So I find the education sector particularly fractured, very difficult to get things out the door and into the place. So that's kind of the intent of this large convening. We have these different sectors here. And when we first did it, I was thinking, well, just people here just talking, nothing's happening. They're just talking, And then I realized it was like my life. I was raised on the beach in Southern California. And if you'd see someone that you'd never seen before, the first time you see them, you just don't say anything, right? The second time you see them, you go, oh, hey, right? Third time you see them, you start to have conversations, right? And then the fourth time, you're actually playing volleyball together. So that's my hope. Here we are in year 4. So I believe you two probably have thoughts about how to make these kinds of cross-sector partnerships. I believe you may be collaborating with Anthropic. So yeah. How did that come about? Like, are there lessons learned for us?
Well, first of all, I couldn't agree more with how you describe, the beach. Yeah. Like, honestly, it's so underappreciated. Convening, like creating the space that enables people to build the relationships, to have the debates. I think it's it's kind of the missing piece to like accelerate progress.
So we're actually
with Anthropic.
We're sort of unique at that. Stanford's sort of a trusted convener, and so people come. Like if I had an NSF research grant, I would only bring researchers. Or if I go to ASU GSV, it's mainly entrepreneurs. Whereas here we can bring them.
That's very cool.
So it's a unique
and very
role for
important.
us.
We have this partnership with Anthropic. Again, it was motivated by our belief that we need teachers who are equity focused on actually transforming our education system, driving the change. They are helping to train all these teachers and educate them on how to maximize AI in their classrooms. And they're in the WhatsApp groups. We've got all these different groups, different languages, et cetera, learning from them. So they're seeing the challenges these teachers are facing. Like if they're teaching in Ogun State, Nigeria, and are like, everything I can access is English medium and rooted in a different culture, like it's good for those Anthropic executives to be like, okay, actually this is going to go nowhere unless we solve that problem. I mean, they know intellectually we need to solve the problem, but if every day they're realizing this is going nowhere, they're going to get on it more quickly. So that's the idea, is to have kind of a two-way, like they're educating teachers and the teachers are innovating, and hopefully they're going to come up with, I mean, again, like AI gives the power to teachers to do incredible things to really good ends if they're oriented in the way we all hope.
So the value proposition for Anthropic is really the feedback and the use models that they get for it?
Yeah.
Interesting. Have you had experience in this, trying to get different sectors together?
I would say that I tend to be focused a bit more on the private sector, but in my volunteerism, for example, I serve as a trustee of Sesame Workshop, which does Sesame Street. And one of the things that they have done is partner with Google around different ways of distributing what is really backed by early childhood education research. Almost everything that happens on Sesame Street has gone through this gauntlet of real practitioners and academics in terms of whether or not it actually advances kids' learning for that age group. They also have developed technology platforms that can be used in refugee camps, for example, in conjunction with the International Refugee Committee. So we're looking at technology as a way to get that education in the hands of kids everywhere in the world, and using philanthropic dollars and commercial dollars, because we license certain aspects of the programming, certain aspects of the characters for profit use, so that we can support the educational mission. So we do work on a variety of different approaches that incorporate education, technology, as well as real evidence-backed education for kids in that age group.
So that the charge to you is to go mingle, get to know each other, go on a date, figure out how you can help combine the best of research and entrepreneurship and philanthropy and government. That's the purpose of this, so go do that.